Hello and welcome to the NEI Network Essentials series where I will break down the fundamentals of networking. This is part one to the series and we're answering one question. What is a network? So a network is going to provide a method of communication between two nodes generally. And so the method of which that you provide that communication is what the network is essentially. There are many different types of networks, but we'll talk about some specific examples of what you might see for a network and how it can provide communication between those two nodes. So you can kind of think of a network like a web, right? And so you've heard the term World Wide Web before, I'm sure, and that's a representation of one of the largest networks we have, the internet. But you can think of it as a web because if you have multiple nodes, objects, devices that need to talk to each other, the method of which they talk to each other is the network, and you can think of it as a web or a fabric, right? So it is something physical in nature that is allowing communication between two devices. And so I would actually define it as a network, or more specifically a computer network, because in this context we are talking about in relation to computers. So a network, or more specifically a computer network, is a collection of computers, the nodes I was referring to, connected by a communication medium containing both physical and logical components. So that is my definition that I put together for network, but I think that captures the essence of what a network is. It is something that allows two devices, two nodes to communicate to each other. So you can think of some examples of that, and the biggest example, like I talked about before, is the internet. So, when you are online and accessing a website, or perhaps you are on your laptop and accessing a computer system at work. So let's say you're using Microsoft Outlook to get some email, and the email server that you talk to is somewhere at a work facility, in a data center, or in your office, or could be in the cloud, could be using something like Microsoft 365. You are using a network to get there. So on the left you see the laptop there, so that is going to represent how you're going to interface with the internet, and then up top you have the representation of a website or something you would be reaching, or the computer on the right is some type of node, or with kind of representing a server. And we'll talk about kind of that client server relationship later, but the important point here is that it requires some method of communication, and really the biggest representation of a network that we have is the internet. That's many devices worldwide that is connected by this web, this fabric. You also have something called a LAN, or a local area network. And there are many representations of this, but this is smaller than the internet, right? The internet is, like I told you, one of the biggest representations of a network that we know. And a LAN is a smaller implementation of a network. So local area network. So a good example of that is your home network. So that's a local area network. But also one that you probably interact with often is your network at work. So if you work in an office, or if you work in a retail store, if you work in the service industry, you're in a hotel, within that building or that confined space, your IT department will have built you a local area network. And so that describes this web, this fabric that allows you to communicate locally. A lot of times, if you're in an office building, you'll have a, a computer that you're using. So you'll have maybe a desktop PC, and you'll have a monitor, and then you will have a physical connection into a network device that will be the first layer of connectivity into the network, and a lot of times that's a switch. And in that switch, you'll have multiple devices. So this is your computer that's connected, but then you might have your neighbor that's connected as well. And you might have multiple switches. So you might have a switch per floor of your office building, and within that local area network, you're maybe connecting to a server of some sort. So maybe you have your email hosted locally at your site, or maybe there is an intranet, like an internal website that you use to that is used to house data about your company. Usually you can get information about HR, or find out how to submit a trouble ticket, get the number for your help desk. Usually information about if you're selling a product, you might have product information there, but you'll generally access that intranet via your local area network. You might have some printing services, so if you have a printer on your floor, you're able to print from your PC to that printer. That is all using the local area network. And then you may have a router here, which will provide connectivity to the outside world. So you'll have a WAN service most of the time, and that stands for Wide Area Network. And that is what can connect you to the internet. It can also, perhaps connect you to another, remote office. If you have, this is in Atlanta, you might have so if this is in Atlanta, this might be in Dallas. And if this is in Dallas, then you would connect over some type of wide area network, also known as the WAN, as I just said. And then this might be a router as well. And then you might have a local area network here. And you're able to bridge the connectivity between the local area network in Dallas and the local area network in Atlanta through your WAN service, right? And that could be a private connection, or it could actually go over the internet. But you can see how in everything I've described here, we're talking about connecting nodes on the network together, right? So you have this node over here. You may communicate maybe via chat program with this person over here that's in another office in Dallas, right? But this is all happening via the network, right? And there are different types of networks that I even mentioned here. The focus here was the local area network. So this is, a network that is contained within a smaller area. And a good example of that is in, an office building you may work in. And then we also have, so here, in the previous slide, I, discussed the local area network, and that was really talking about physical connections. So when we talk about switches and routers, there's generally physical cable connections, whether that be fiber or copper connections. There are physical connections connecting those devices together. Then you also have the wireless network as well, and there are it's a different method of communication. Probably most commonly familiar with that at home. So if you have a home router that provides internet, a lot of time that router will provide wireless for your house or apartment. And so I think everybody today is familiar with wireless. You can connect on your phone from your PC. A lot of times you do that not only at home, but in public places, at work, airports, coffee shops, things of that nature, right? And so, this is using a wireless frequency to allow you to communicate with a wireless controller, and then, from device to device. But a lot of times you're just, again, going out to the internet. And so, wireless is another example of a type of network. Again, you are bridging connectivity between, two nodes or multiple nodes over some type of fabric. It just happens to be that in this case, it's wireless. We talked a little bit about this in the LAN example, but there are various network devices that allow you to communicate, and so the switch here is what will make physical connections. So again, in an office example, if you have your computer, you will be connecting a lot of times a physical cable to some type of device. Let's say this is just your computer, and you're connected by a physical cable, right? And then that switch might be connected to the router, and then the router is connected to the internet. And so these are all physical connections that allow you to connect together, but these devices have different functions. And so in some of my later videos, I'll actually break down what a router does, what a switch does, what their function is in the network. Another thing that I don't have here, which was on the last slide, is the wireless controller. So that's another device that operates on the network, and while it itself might actually have a physical connection, so this is how it gets out to the internet, but if you're on your phone, then you would connect to that via wireless communication, 802.11. So that's a protocol, but again, we'll get into the specifics of that. I want to keep this basic, and so these devices are things that will allow you to communicate on the network, and they will bridge that communication in different ways and through different mediums. And also a lot of people are familiar with a router that you may have at home. So this example is really depicting something that would be an enterprise setting. So in the office, and provide WAN connectivity to that local area network. Same thing with this switch. However, there are home versions of this, so you have your home router, home switches that you can use. And so a lot of times, all three of these functions are compacted into one device. So you'll have a home router that acts as a router, as a switch, as a wireless controller, all compacted into one device. And that's it. Thank you for watching my video, What is a Network? Again, this is the first video in my Network Essentials series. I have more videos coming out explaining, what a network is, and the components of networks, and how to become a network engineer. Again, that's for beginners, aspiring engineers. I also have some videos on more advanced subjects as well. Please check out my blog, networkengineerinfo.com. I'll have companion articles to my videos and also standalone articles as well. And come back. I'll have more content, and hope you enjoyed this one. And we'll be back soon. Thanks.